Huawei has just announced the P30 and P30 Pro. These phones are the first real challenge to Samsung's Galaxy S10 and S10 Plus, which I reviewed, and both are excellent. But Huawei is upping the ante with 4 rear cameras on the back of the P30 and some top-notch specs. All of this is a big deal because Samsung and Huawei are the world's top 2 phone makers in that order. But Huawei wants to take Samsung's crown and thinks that the P30 Pro might help do it. Since the Pro and the Plus represent the best of the line, those are the devices that I'm going to focus on in this video. But you can read much more in my written versus piece. Screen size is about the same on both phones, with 6.4 inches on the S10 Plus and 6.47 inches on the P30 Pro. Samsung's phone has the edge on resolution, but it's a pretty slippery device if you don't have a case. The P30 Pro feels a bit thicker in the hand, a little easier to hold on to. One of the first things I noticed is how small the P30 Pro's notch looks. It's a teardrop shape housing a single front-facing camera. The S10 Plus has a much larger screen cutout and it's off to the side. It's not too distracting most of the time, but yeah, you do see it. Both of these phones have in-screen fingerprint readers at the bottom of the display. Samsung uses Qualcomm's ultrasonic fingerprint reader, which uses sound waves to unlock the device. And Huawei goes for an optical fingerprint sensor, which basically takes a photo of your fingerprint. Optical readers are said to be easier to fool. However, accuracy on the Galaxy S10 Plus has been really hit or miss so far. This is a trade-off, but it's one that you can avoid if you prefer to use a PIN or password instead. All right, what else? There is a headphone jack on the regular P30, but not on the P30 Pro. The S10 Plus has a headphone jack too, and both phones will work with wireless Bluetooth headphones. Looking at software, both of these devices are running Android Pie with their own software layers on top. The P30 Pro uses Huawei's EMUI 9.1 interface. Huawei says that it'll be faster overall, especially when it comes to loading up apps. This UI has an iPhone look and feel with the apps stretched out across multiple home screens, so whether you like it or not, this is something to keep in mind. The last thing I want to point out is the way that these phones look. Huawei is really good at making cool, eye-catching gradients and color patterns. The P30 Pro comes in amber sunrise, pearl white, aurora, something called breathing crystal, and black. Meanwhile, you can get the Galaxy S10 Plus in flamingo pink, canary yellow, prism white, prism blue, and prism black. There are also ceramic white and ceramic black models. So now that we're settled on design, it's time to take a look at the cameras. This is where Huawei really hopes to pull ahead, especially leaning on its long-standing partnership with photography veteran Leica. Let's start with the Galaxy S10 Plus, which has 3 cameras on the back and 2 on the front. Now the P30 Pro has 4 rear cameras, including a 3D time-of-flight sensor that helps improve portrait shots. For the other 3 cameras, you get a 40-megapixel lens that uses something Huawei calls super spectrum. This is a new approach to cameras that changes the RGB filters for red, green, and blue to RYB, red, yellow, and blue. Huawei thinks the yellow will help keep photos bright and detailed. There's also a 20-megapixel ultra-wide-angle lens on the back, and finally, a square cutout, which is an 8-megapixel lens with 5 times optical periscope zoom. On the other hand, the Galaxy S10 Plus has a 12-megapixel camera, a 16-megapixel ultra-wide-angle lens, and a 12-megapixel telephoto lens. Photos are terrific in most lighting scenarios on the S10 Plus, but there are times when portrait mode filters blur out strands of hair and other details, so it will be interesting to see if the P30 Pro really addresses that. Huawei's phone also has a dedicated night mode, which has done phenomenally in our tests so far. Low-light images are definitely sharper and brighter than on the Galaxy S10 Plus, and I think that's one of Huawei's biggest opportunities with the P30 Pro's camera here. Another is AI HDR+, which is Huawei's way of saying that its software can even out backlit scenes so that people look like people and not silhouettes. Flipping the phone over, the S10 Plus has 10 and 8 megapixel lenses for taking selfies, while the P30 Pro has that single 32 megapixel lens. Just one note about megapixels, and that's a reminder that more isn't always better. How the cameras process photos and let in more light, that's what's crucial. We just won't know how the P30 Pro performs against the Galaxy S10 Plus until we do some really deep testing side by side. In the meantime, take a look at my colleague Andrew Hoyle's great photo showdown in Paris for an idea of how these phones work. Let's take a break from the cameras and talk about all the other good stuff under the hood. Battery, the processor, storage. The S10 Plus has a 4100 milliamp battery and really amazing longevity that can take you from early morning to late night. The Pro is 4,200 milliamps, so hopefully it'll perform about the same. They both support wireless charging and can charge other devices. On the processor front, the S10 Plus goes with Qualcomm's Snapdragon 855 chipset, or in some regions with its own Exynos processor. I've tested it with Snapdragon and it's fantastically fast. Huawei has its house-made Kirin 980 chipset, the same that we saw with the Mate 20, which is also a great phone. The chipset is one indicator for performance, but again, we won't know how it all comes together until we test the two phones side by side. Finally, it's time to talk storage. Samsung gave the Galaxy S10 Plus 3 storage options: 128 gigs, 512 gigs, or 1 terabyte of storage. I know, that's a lot. Plus, you get up to 512 gigabytes more if you buy an external storage card. And the two largest models have those ceramic casings. Huawei punches back with 128, 256, and 512 gigabyte options and up to 256 gigabytes of external card storage with its even smaller proprietary tech called the NM or Nano Memory Card. All right, let's wrap a bow around this, talk about pricing and availability. The P30 Pro starts at 1,000 euros and about 900 pounds, which is roughly the same price as the S10 Plus. Now, this phone isn't going to be sold in the US because of political pressure from the government, but it will sell globally. I think we're really going to need to rely on that deep side-by-side testing to see if the S10 Plus has benefits that will outweigh the P30 Pro. So far, though, we're really liking what we see, and Samsung should pay attention. Make sure you check out all of our great P30 Pro coverage, including first impressions, at cnet.com.